Hey guys, really glad to be here with you today. My name is Pastor Brody and I get to share with you one of my favorite hobbies, and that's playing with Lego. Now, when I first started playing with Lego, I would work on small projects that were manageable. And by starting small, I could learn the techniques used to make these projects come to life. So things like hinges and doors and stacking bricks in the right way to make sure it's a strong build so that it doesn't just fall apart when I put it on a shelf or when I play with it. As I grew up, I got to move on to slightly larger projects. Here's one of the houses that I built a couple years back, and it was one of my favorites when I bought it. It's obviously bright red, it's full of interesting techniques, the roof comes off and you can see the inside there. And I had to follow the instructions really closely to make sure that I didn't put anything in the wrong spot, otherwise it wouldn't fit together. Then, after going for a couple more years, I was able to move on into the biggest projects that Lego sells. Things like this, with special angles and cool items down here, cool techniques on the ground. These actually come off, so there's a lot of structure that goes into this. But what's important is that as I'm building, I have a solid foundation. If I don't have a solid foundation to start on, the build isn't actually going to take place the way it's supposed to, and it might break as I'm putting it together. What's also interesting is, even though this is quite a different model from this bigger build still uses a lot of the same techniques that the smaller builds use. So I was able to build on the techniques that I've been using for years and create something more, create something bigger, something that looks even better than how I started. Pastor Jono is going to be talking to us today about what it means to build on what we know as we follow Jesus and to have Jesus as a solid foundation. Because if we don't have a solid foundation in Jesus, well, that didn't work. Like this house doesn't, it might just fall apart.
Hey everyone! Today we are looking at a parable that Jesus taught. Now, a parable is a pretty simple story that actually has a bigger, more important meaning, and it has something to do with God and following Him. Now, I'd imagine that a bunch of you know this parable, which is found in Matthew 7 and Luke 6. Now, a wise man wanted to build a new house. Where should he build it? Well, he wanted his house to stand strong and last for many years. He wanted it to be a safe place for his family to live in, even in the middle of a storm. So, this wise man found some land and dug down deep to the layer of rock underground and laid the foundation on top of the rock. Then he took his bricks and his stones and strong beams of wood, working hard to build up the walls and roof until one day his house was complete. Now, as the wind and the waves beat against the house, this wise man was safe with his family in their house that they built, surviving the storm and standing firm. Now, you probably know that there's another man in this story who wanted to build a new house as well, but he was a bit of a foolish man, and he built his house on top of the shifting sand. It was probably pretty easy and simple to dig into sand and build on top of the soft dirt. Now, when that storm came, however, the rain and the wind that beat against that house caused it to collapse, falling flat, unable to stay standing. So, in this parable, this technically made-up story by Jesus, it's meant to teach us something, to remind us something important about God and following Him. Jesus said, "If you hear my words and do what it says, you will be like that wise man who built his house on the rock with a strong foundation." Putting the Bible into practice, well, that's just a wise, helpful, and good thing to do. What use is it to hear good instructions and then just to ignore them? It's as silly and foolish as building a house on top of sand, hoping that it'll stay standing. The good news is that Jesus is our cornerstone, the first and largest, strongest starting block in a foundation. You see, without a cornerstone in place, the foundation wouldn't be as strong, and without a strong foundation, the whole building falls down. Side note, here are some buildings from real life that had foundations that weren't good enough to keep the buildings standing firm. Now, Jesus is our cornerstone because with him, we have a strong foundation. When we listen to Jesus and do what he says, we can go through life knowing that we can stand firm no matter what storms might come our way.